Well, let's, as we do every week, begin with prayer. Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner, and for all of the things that we are about to say and explain from your scriptures. Give your illumination from your Spirit who abides within us. We are grateful for what you have done through your Son, Jesus, and for the providential oversight that you as the Father have given. And we give you all the praise and glory. Amen. This is the 6th episode for those of you who are counting, and for those of you who are actually here concerned about fall break. We are actually taking next week off, so there will be no adult class or classes next week, just so that you're familiar with that and ready. But we wanted to make sure that we ended on a high note. Last week, of course, we emphasized that work sucks. That's probably not a really great place to end just before fall break, so we don't want to end there. We actually want to have the antidote to that. And I would suggest the antidote comes from a Canadian songwriter-singer, and his name is Leonard Cohen. And he wrote this great anthem, and I love these words. I love his music, but this song in particular: ring the bells that you still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. So we know we live in a fallen world. We know that there are cracks in everything. We know that there is an imperfect world in which we exist. And at the same time, we recognize that those cracks are the ways of the mercies of God. And so that's how the light gets in. His point, of course, Leonard Cohen's point, is forget your perfect offering. Forget the idea that somehow you can perfectly get through the problem of whatever the issue might be. And in this case, obviously, in our jurisdiction over this series, we're concerned with vocation, with calling, with work, with our jobs, with our 9 to 5, with our Monday to Saturday. And emphasizing the kinds of things that we have done all the way through, it's important to come back to this slide. And this slide is very important. That is, that everything is sacred. There is no such thing as secular anything. As you remember the very first time I was emphasizing this, there is no secular anything. Just as there is no secular physics, no secular chemistry, there is no secular music or secular movies. The idea that sin has corrupted things, yes, sin's corrupted everything. But emphasis today, emphasis this week, it can also be redeemed. So our work, our jobs, our vocation, our calling is, of course, a redemptive possibility. This week I came across a number of articles that I thought were important for what we were emphasizing, and one of them kind of flipped everything I was going to do this week, and I thought, I'm just going to add it to the outline. So if you notice on your handouts, there is the TOPS concept, which doesn't change from week to week, and then the second one with Leonard Cohen's lines there. And then you'll notice these 5 words that are on the screen but are also on your handouts, that there is an emphasis that ought to be in our thinking about work. That's ethical, vocational, local, communal, and pastoral. And I want to emphasize each one of those in their proper perspective as I'm also going through the outline that you see in front of you on the handout. So I'm kind of inserting 2 different ideas, two different outlines that I do think connect for us, and specifically within the realm of redemption and redeeming our work and our vocation. This particular Gallup poll was fascinating to me. With all of the downgrade of everything, if you look at how many people think that Congress is doing a good job, or the president's doing a good job, or the military, or universities, or you name it, the numbers are all down. Everybody's doing a lousy job, except for business. I found this fascinating. So in business, actually the percentage here is that, generally speaking, people have a 63% positive view of what businesses do. So think about the implications of this. Whatever it is that your calling is, whether you're a student in high school or college, whether you're a business person, whether you're a homemaker, doesn't matter. Whatever the vocation is, you have a 63% positive rating from the general populace. People think that people in business, generally speaking, have a positive impact on culture. So think about the implications of that. That means that our jobs really do make a difference, and people look at us differently because of that. Now, as I suggested, I'm going to hit these high points, these ethical, vocational, local, communal, and pastoral ideas all the way through, but I wanted to suggest something that goes along with my ethics story. So this is a slide that I actually use at IUPUI. It's a slide that suggests that there is a basis for ethics that's outside of us. One of the great things about being a university professor is that when they give you your course and they give you the responsibilities of the objectives of that particular course, you can teach that course any way you see fit, which is marvelous because I think that how I teach this course is really important. And one of the sessions we have in this course, actually in week 4, is on ethics. So you'll notice here that when I teach this, the idea of what should I do or why should I do anything, and remember, anytime somebody says the word should, they're automatically identifying an ethical system. This kind of ethic is really important. Well, along with every session that we go through, I have an attendance pad because it's a face-to-face course and attendance is important, and so I give an attendance question every day. That day, when we were dealing with ethics, I asked the question, what is your source of ethics to my classes? So about 50 students in these classes. And guess what they said? Their source of ethics, half of them said, was myself. Wow. Is that telling, or is that telling about the culture in which we live? And I'm suggesting to us that this isn't simply Gen Z. I'm suggesting that the whole emphasis all the way through is exactly the same. So my point about redeeming work, how do I actually redeem English? I think we lost our, there we go. There it is. How do I do redemption? I teach ethical English. So I actually believe that redemption can go through any kind of class, no matter what that class might be. So to the outline that you have in front of you here, the very first point, we're emphasizing that God's ethical intention is to redeem through all of these ways, through the giftings, vocations, and work that we do, and the things that we've been given to do. Exodus 29 to 32 is all about Bezaleel. He's the guy who built the accoutrements to the temple, fancy word for furniture. He's the guy who did all of this stuff, and God literally invested in him the Spirit so that he could do these kinds of things. It doesn't matter your gender, your ethnicity, your class. We are all given these kinds of things that we can do in our jobs, and that all of these kinds of things are opportunities given to us. So, as Acts 3:21 says, going all the way back to the book of Genesis again, what God begins, he also finishes. Until the time when God restores everything, he will restore everything, but until that time, we have the responsibility of this process and this practice of redemption and redeeming our work. How do we do that? Well, here's another slide that might suggest this. Why is God's intention important? Again, going from Genesis to Revelation, from his intention to the culmination of all things in the book of Revelation. What is my job until that time? It is to redeem the time. And we see this in a couple of passages in Colossians and in Ephesians that emphasize this opportunity that we have in our vocational lives. So it doesn't matter the time, it doesn't matter the place, it doesn't matter the job, it doesn't matter the vocation that we have. Whatever it is that we do, we bear responsibility to redeem it. The word redeem there in these passages literally means to buy back, to purchase it back, to utilize the financial responsibility. It's a financial term. It's to use that financial responsibility properly, to spend our time wisely, to expend our time in a financial sense wisely, to redeem it. So the second idea here of redemption goes right along with that, and our responsibility is the same. Our responsibility comes out of Genesis 1:28, where God says, "You are to subdue and have dominion over the earth." Now, those two words in Hebrew mean manage and conserve. So if we were to translate them straight across, those words simply mean to manage and conserve what God has given to us. And as I suggest to anybody who wants to hear me talk about these kinds of things, whether it be my colleagues at university or even students, I'll say to them, you all are about the environmental movement and conservation. You do realize, don't you, that the very base word for conservation is to conserve. And in order to conserve, you must be a conservative. That is, the person who is actually concerned about conserving is the conservative. Who is the person who best controls the things that they own? The one that has jurisdiction over them at their house, over their property, over their land. All of those kinds of things make a difference. Notice some of the other words that I've suggested here. Our responsibility is to develop this. So I chose this pathway through an environmentally protected area of life to identify a way in which we do this as human beings. We want to enjoy the thing that's there, and so we build this very small way to get through that process and that piece of land, not to disrupt it very much at all, but at the same time to develop it. We have a privilege of actually doing this, and it's our responsibility. We have an obligation to do so. Now, this also comes in the sense of stewardship, and I've shown this slide before, and you remember actually from a couple weeks ago when we talked about work as joy, that God put people into the garden to work it. It's a joyous, liberating service to God. That's what that word actually means. Well, guess what? There is redemption in stewardship. There is redemption in conservation. Our responsibility as conservative people, and I don't mean that necessarily socially or politically, what I do mean is that this is a biblical concept of conservation. We bear this responsibility to steward and to husband that which we have been given. And I always think about farmers in this way. Farmers are the ones who do this better than anybody else, because if they don't take care of their land, the very thing that produces for them will rebel against them. So being a farmer is a big deal, and it's a good example, I think, of our responsibility to manage and conserve that which we have been given. Well, there is also this cultural mandate, and I want to emphasize this. We often talk about the Great Commission in Matthew chapter 28, 19 and 20. Go into all the world and preach the gospel. That's the Great Commission. This is the Great Commandment. This is the cultural mandate from Genesis chapter 1, verses 28 and 29. What does that mean? It means that God has told human beings to take care of his world. So I think I've mentioned my lawn before. I should probably mention it to you again, since I was actually cutting it again this week. One of the things that's important is that I have pine trees around the back section of my lawn. And if I don't rake up those pine needles, they will kill the grass. My job is to manage the grass, that is, to take care of it in a way that benefits it. Now, that might seem like a really small thing. It's a big deal to me, because it's my responsibility. And I don't want the pine trees to kill the grass, even though I love the pine trees. So, my responsibility is to manage that which God has given me to manage, to conserve. And at the same time, we bear these other responsibilities of both common grace and beneficence. God gives good gifts to everybody, and he sets the standard for that goodness. And that's what God has established in the book of Genesis chapter 1, verses 28 and 29. To follow that through, it's important then to give just generally an understanding of what common grace is. It literally means this goodness coming from God, a transcendent, immanent goodness, including work that benefits everybody. The scriptural emphasis is on God's beneficence and goodness in weather, language, discovery, agriculture, and all things. This goes all the way back to our very first session, where we talked about all means all, and that's all means. In everything that has been given to us, it is for our good and for our benefit, coming from the beneficence of God, no matter what. We also talk about this in terms of locally. So we think about what we do in our time and place and in our locale, the place that God has given us to live. So in our case, we live in Fishers, Indiana. What's our responsibility in our subdivision, in the vocational jobs that we've been given to do? I don't see too many people out with chainsaws, but I do see an awful lot of people out with lawnmowers. So there seems to be some kind of connection between what we do locally with our grass and everything else in life around us. We have been given time and gifts and opportunities and a place in which to live. Our responsibility is a local responsibility. So here are some examples from Christian history in the past. This one from C.S. Lewis, in one of my favorite essays of all time. He wrote, Learning During Wartime. He wrote this during World War II. A mole may dig to the glory of God, and a rooster may crow. We are members of one body, but differentiated members, each with his own vocation. A man's upbringing, his talents, his circumstances are usually a tolerable index of his vocation. So wherever we've been placed in life, whatever gifts we've been given, whatever opportunities have been afforded us, these are all given to us by God in His providence. And just like the creation does what it does in its time and place, so do we. We shouldn't be surprised by any of this. Now, this next one might get a little dirty. I always think about Mike Rowe when I think about this slide, but here it is. This is from Garrard Manley Hopkins, who wrote, To lift up the hands in prayer gives God glory, but a man with a dung fork in his hand, a woman with a slop pail, give him glory too. He is so great that all things give him glory, if you mean that they should. So, can you work in the sewer system and give glory to God? Yes. Because what you do is very important for everybody else, for the community, for the locale in which you are in. All of this done to His praise and to His glory. So is this, and I mentioned this, I believe it was last week. One of my students emailed me and told me that his job, this was back in 2003 in the Marine Corps, was as a tank killer. And this is what he said, I do my job to the glory of God. And this is what Martin Luther said, It is not that I slay, but God and my prince, for my hand and my body are now their servants. Humble and reserved before God, soldiers should smite the enemy with a confident and untroubled spirit. Because just like anybody else, the military actually has a job. And they have been given time and place and circumstance and opportunity, just like we have. Which makes me think about what happened not this Saturday, but last Saturday. One that has shaken the world, as well it should, and one that I think I at least need to speak to briefly, and that is Israel's darkest day. This is actually a slide that was done based on a piece that I read in Law and Liberty, which is actually from the foundation here in Indianapolis. And what was really interesting to me about this, and this man was writing about how awful this was, and there could be no moral equivalence or equivocation of what happened to Israel when it was attacked and many slaughtered in ways that you all know about. What struck me about this was the emphasis on education. Right in the middle of this essay, he wrote these words that are on the screen. The present generation of Israelis has become soft and complacent. He went on to explain that soft and complacent simply meant they hadn't done the hard work, that is, they hadn't done the warfare to get them to the place that they were at today. They've principally had an easy life as far as this man is concerned, has specific personal knowledge of the Middle East. But at the same time, my immediate thought went to my own students, went to the generation that I am teaching, who hasn't had a very hard time in any very physical sense of things. Their hard time has come in different ways, which is really an accumulation of a problem of loneliness and anxiety and depression, which is a whole nother discussion point. But my emphasis here is that we actually bear responsibility to redeem education. This is what I wrote in response to that particular letter. The problem of being soft ripples through the fattened securities of all Western nations, incapable of anything more than self-satisfaction and wealth they did not create and order they did not achieve. The young have no idea why they should care for the future of their country, and they will begin to care when everything is taken from them, when it will be too late to do anything about it. We are watching the slow but accelerating slide into tyranny. Those are my words. I stand by those words. It is a very important concern for me, a concern that I actually express to students from time to time. But this idea of being soft, and specifically that young people have no idea why they should care for the future of their country, when an awful lot of people all around them in university, media, you take your pick, downplay the place in which they live and the country that has given them so much. This is a real problematic issue, I think, generally speaking, which goes to the issue of what does Scripture teach? And that is that memory is the basis for history, that God expects us to learn from Him from the past. And there are all different kinds of ideas here that I won't and can't really take time to elaborate on, except that I've talked about this quite a bit in past sessions, and in fact in this last spring session about the university, we did a whole series, a 6-part series on this. One part specifically was dedicated to history. You can go back on our websites and find those sessions if you're so inclined to listen to them. The fourth idea on this handout here is that righteousness, justice, peace, hope, and order and structure are all there for our benefit. And they all come out of this Genesis 1 idea of to manage and conserve. Our theology should redeem our sociology. It doesn't work the other way around. Now let me just preach for about 30 seconds here. Hang on. It unnerves me when I hear people say, sometimes people who call themselves believers, who look first through their cultural lens to see what the culture is saying, and then try to go find Bible verses to back them up, instead of allowing Scripture to teach them and inform them of truth, to then critique their culture. That is the way it ought to be done. Ultimately, however, we see so often that sociology drives people's theology. It should not be. It should be the other way around. So this last week, I was teaching on, I can't remember what I was teaching on this last week. But one of the examples that came up with it was this idea, and this slide was not given to students, but we were discussing about how advertising and communication makes a difference. And I said, you know those big green signs that you see going down the highway, and they advertise certain places to stop and eat when you're on 465 or 69? Yeah. I said, if you see a Chick-fil-A sign, there's a Chick-fil-A at this exit. I said, what is the other phrase that appears immediately below the words Chick-fil-A? And they almost all, in unison, said, closed on Sunday. I smiled. I paused. I said, do you know why? Do you know where that comes from? Do you know who the people are that own Chick-fil-A? Well, here's Dan Cathy, for instance. This is his family business. And I emphasize this very idea, that his family and his religious tradition, I always couch it in the term of religious at the university, his religious tradition suggests that everybody deserves a day off. And it actually comes from the Bible. And so I said, when you see that green sign and you see closed on Sunday, you can think to yourself that there's been a cultural influence of that company in a way that has now influenced the rest of society and culture. Because everybody knows you can't get Chick-fil-A on Sunday. And then there were some moans and groans in the back of the room. Yeah, I know. I get up and I think, I want Chick-fil-A. I should have gotten some yesterday, that I could heat up today. Students. So, we redeem sociology through our theology. And our responsibility is that every role we have in this culture is pastoral. Now, I just want to emphasize this really hard because I don't think we think this way. Ephesians 4:11 and 12 says that we have responsibility to have pastors. What's really important about that is that not only is that those ideas there gender-free, that is, that there are pastoral responsibilities for men and women, see Titus chapter 2, but at the same time, it is given across the board for all different kinds of people, so that the idea coming out of the Greek language there is that this is a pastoral ministry which exists everywhere. So think about moms who take care of little kids. That's a pastoral ministry. Think about professors like me who take care of their students. That's a pastoral ministry. Business people who take care of the folks that they are serving or the folks that are working with them. That's a pastoral ministry. Where's that come from? It comes from a slide I showed you a couple weeks ago, that we are all redeemers. We are the priesthood of all believers. And because of this, this means that our pastoral role is that of a shepherd, a guide, a leader. All of these passages suggest the same kind of thing. I am standing between the one who has made me and given me my responsibility and the people that I'm serving. And again, in my case, it's students. In your case, it might be the folks that you're serving in your company. Where does that come from? Well, it comes right out of this idea that another slide from the past, Titus chapter 2. What does Titus emphasize? The three so-that's. You're supposed to do these things so that people will be attracted to the gospel. That's actually how it ends in chapter 2 and verse 10. My pastoral role, whatever it is that I do, whatever I'm invested in, whatever my vocation, we all are pastors in that sense, is that of a shepherd, a leader, and a guide. How am I to do that? Through excellence and benevolence. You've seen this slide before. Do you see a man skillful in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure men, Proverbs 22 says. So our responsibility in our jobs, in our vocations, is to do it with excellence. And caring for the people that are with us, that's the benevolence. And, just to highlight that one more time, our responsibility as pastors is to love people. That's my job, is to love people and care for people. Actually, I said that on Thursday. We're on fall break here this next week, and I actually said that to my students, that I loved them just before we went on fall break. That's my job, my pastoral role in the classroom. And my job is to love people and walk properly, as the passage here says, before outsiders, before those who do not believe. So, the fifth idea in this handout, if you're following along right there at the top, it's about in the middle of the page, is to redeem understanding these four relationships. It's us with God, creation, others, and ourselves. But what I want you to notice is the fivefold statement right below that on the handout. I don't have a slide for this, I just left it on the handout. Our responsibility in renewal is virtue and goodness, to think, be, and do good. The second point is that broken and mended are in need of hope, that peace pulls all the pieces together, that shalom indicates wholeness. 3, the excellence emphasis we've just highlighted. The fourth idea here is to work with others, to agree to disagree toward a common good. We celebrate the good works of others. Our belief is nothing without action, and we should not second-guess another person's intentions or motivations. Go check out those passages in this regard. And then finally, number 5, sin is messed up. Grace is a messy way out. So the idea of the emphasis is that life is messy and that sin messes things up, and grace is messy to get it reinvented, to get that light through the cracks, as Leonard Cohen has suggested. Well, where should this take place? It should take place in the local church. There should be a communal space, and for us, it's here. Now, when we talk about the local church, we are talking about this place that is important for us as an autonomous group, but at the same time, the necessity of community. We can't do anything without community. And so it's important to give some examples of this. Our sister church, for instance, down on 16th and Delaware, Redeemer Presbyterian. They have some really cool things that they've done over the years. not the least of which has been the Harrison Center for the Arts and also the Heron School. Now, I highlight these ideas simply to point out the fact that we are redeeming our communal space. If you ever go to the Harrison Center for the Arts, and I encourage you to do so, it is literally connected to the church building. You can't help but be in the church building and in the Harrison Center for the Arts at the same time. They are commingled, as it were. And then, of course, to see Heron High School just a block or so over come out of that church and some of the folks working within that church is really important. So what are they doing? They're redeeming their communal space, literally right around the church and the church building that they are invested in. A couple of weeks ago, I emphasized this idea that the most enjoyable human focus is seeking satisfaction and the pursuit of interest. We shouldn't be surprised at this. People everywhere are looking for meaning in life. And I think it's important to highlight those kinds of concepts. And along with that, of course, what does Scripture teach us? That very same idea. Scripture teaches, seek first the kingdom. This, of course, will give meaning to life if we seek this wisdom diligently. And we are not surprised by any of that. Well, this is part of my work story. I thought I would share this this week. This is a slide actually from Thursday's class. So I've had 16 sessions with my students so far. The 8.2 indicates it's the 8th week in the second session. So I'm prompting them, getting them ready for a paper that is to take on an idea that they're really passionate about, at the same time identifying people or groups or sources that might disagree with them. And they have to have two sources and at least two arguments from another point of view. And I'm very clear about how that is all mapped out, and I won't go into great detail about what that all means necessarily for that particular paper. But what I would like to suggest is that this kind of thing is the kind of thing we ought to be doing. Now, if you're at all interested in such a thing, I suggest that you create your own manifesto. I've actually got a few leftover handouts up here from Thursday's class, if you're so inclined. And I've got a couple here. And on the back of this handout, so you can actually see how I structure my class on the front. And then on the back is also part of the structure, but I actually ask my students to do this. So I say to them, and I'm just reading off the page, based on your core beliefs, what you stand for, I want you to write your manifesto. That is this public declaration of your belief. I want you to tell people your commitment to your point of view, and then highlight those ideas. So here are the 10 key statements. Where do you begin? By that I mean, what are your absolutes, your assumptions? Number 2, I believe in, what are my dogmas and my doctrine? I actually use those words in class. Everybody has doctrine, I tell them. Everybody's got things they believe in. Everybody. 3, I want a world of truth and justice. Okay, what's that look like for you? 4, I embrace what ideas and ideals. 5, I want to change or do fill in the blank. 6, I care deeply for what are my goals, my convictions for the future. 7, I hope one day, what are the outcomes, the consequences of my teaching or my manifesto? Number 8, I benefit from what partners and information. 9, I will answer to what is the promise or the accountability for my manifesto. And 10, I will show the world what's my character, what is my reputation. So I thought I would bring these handouts and extra sheets for you to consider what it might mean to actually build your own manifesto. Perhaps a manifesto for your vocation, a manifesto for how you will live your life in the calling that God has given to you. As always, we end with questions, things to consider. How can I view my work as a reclamation of creation? That is to go all the way back. What was God's original intention in Genesis 1 and 2? And how do I reconnect to God's intention that was given? 2, why is the word restoration so important to a Christian understanding of work? Why is it that we care about restoring things? You can think about antiques in this regard. How does a biblical view of sin establish a need for salvation in my whole life, in all of it, not just parts of it? Number 3, how do I define excellence in what I do? Do I understand that excellence means in my vocation and what it takes to maintain a standard of work praised by both God and man? What creative, innovative manifesto thinking can I do that would use what is in me, around me, with me, to refashion my world, the world in which I live for God's glory? And then number 5, how should we be who we are, where we are, with what we have? That's our time, place, and opportunity for all that we have. Is it possible to let the light shine through the cracks? Yes. I think that's really an important visual and important metaphor for us to consider. What does it mean to redeem work? I think a positive way to end just ahead of fall break. Any comments or questions? I don't think we have a mic up here, but I'll do my best to hear whatever anybody has to say. Comments or questions? I am still, by the way, looking for work stories. You'll notice, text me, send me an email with your work story. I'd love to hear about what it is that you do, and I'm sure it will fit in whatever it is that we are teaching in the 6 weeks after fall break. Well, I hope you have a great week and a week off of teaching, but come back after refreshed, looking forward to spending some time talking about what does it mean to rest in work. We will deal with that next. See you then.